Hi. I'm just gonna go ahead and go straight into it because I am a little bit nervous. So as Surrogate said, we've been asked to share our personal journeys, and mine has been quite eventful. It started off quite difficult, so I'm gonna talk a little bit about that. So I'll start with my family and a little bit about the dynamics with that. So I have two older sisters who are 7 and 8 years older than me. And I have a younger brother who's 11 years younger than me. So quite a big age difference with all of us. And what this meant was, we had different types of upbringings in a way because I was with my mother more than they were in certain instances and for different reasons. And being with my mother was really difficult. She struggled all of her life with her mental health. So she was quite unwell mentally for, all that I can remember of my life. And so what that really created was that there was this parent-child role reversal, like fairly early on. Like some of my earliest memories are from me, taking care of her and things that, kind of go into that as well with like when you are having to be the carer for your parents at such a young age is, a lot of, hiding things from people, especially other adults, because you don't want to reveal like what's going on. So what was happening at home was very contained, or tried to have it kind of contained in that way. But there was just a lot of, dysfunction and instability fairly early on. And then what was also happening was that I grew up in American evangelical Christian background, which doesn't really exist so much outside the U.S., thankfully. But if you are familiar with it, it can be quite extreme. And so, there was something that I think Siri Gupta said yesterday about like the us, or maybe Dianata said it, about the us-them group dynamic. And it was very extreme in mine. And so the us was just my little, denomination, and the them was everybody else. And that included other Christians. And hell featured a lot in that, as in everybody else was going to hell. We might still be going to hell, but maybe not, hopefully not, like it was kind of still iffy a lot of the times. And one of the interesting things about this is that I didn't think of it when I was a child that I was rebelling because I just asked lots of questions and I was very curious about things. And the world around me didn't really make sense, so I spent a lot of time reading. I started reading at quite an early age. And what ended up happening is that I learned lots of things that, they really didn't want me to learn, and that included about other religions. And I ended up, bringing that into church and getting in quite a lot of trouble about it. So one of the religions that I did learn about just sort of early on was about Buddhism. And I don't remember, I think I was just really drawn to like the imagery and the mythical and mystical elements of it. And it just seemed quite open. I think I was very early on drawn to ideas that were open because what I was in was very closed. And another part of this was that because of like what was going on, like, with a religion and church and all of that, and then also with my mother, is that I very early on started identifying myself by what I wasn't. So I was not like my mother, and I was not, what I was being told to be at church. And that really informed how I looked at myself and how I looked at the world as I got older. So I ended up being, very, still quite young, this person who had like lots of plans and goals. And I mean, like super detailed plans. I mean, I'd planned out my year, like, and just everything, social life, like academic achievement goals. I mean, just everything was in there. And a lot of times I would, meet those goals, but then I still would feel like this extreme dissatisfaction and just, disappointment about it. But then I still kind of attributed that to, because I was still like, quite young, that, it had to do with my mother, it had to do with the religion. So as soon as I got away from them, everything was going to be fine. I was going to do well, like things were going to be great. But then that didn't actually end up happening. So I got to my 20s and at that point, I had done, a lot of the things I, had wanted to do so far in terms of like how I excelled academically, and then I'd went into the music industry for a bit, and I, did well in that, but then left it. And then I decided to go to university afterwards, and I was doing well academically with that, but I just started being overcome with like this extreme anxiety to the point where I was having panic attacks like on a regular basis, and just being able to function just seemed to be impossible. And then what also was happening at that time was the things that I'd kind of pushed away in terms about, different childhood trauma and relationship with my mother all started coming up above the surface. And so there's just a lot of rage and resentment that at the time felt like it just came out of nowhere, but it was there. And I think I was just pushing it away and trying to, keep it away by, working on myself and thinking that I was going to be able to solve these things on my own. But then I just got to a point where I couldn't do that, and I had to basically just pause my life because I just felt like I could not function. And I ended up seeing a therapist at my university, and he, coincidentally just ended up being a Buddhist because, it was at my university, so it wasn't, a religious or spiritual, practice specifically. But it was just life-changing for me because I was introduced to meditation and also to Buddhism and psychology and working with my mind and being able to see what that would look like to work through the suffering that I was experiencing as a Buddhist. At that time I did not consider myself one, but I knew that what we were working on in those therapy sessions and what I was working on outside of that was really beneficial in a way that nothing else had been at that point. So yeah, that was just, something that was very life-changing for me because I think that there's lots of different ways and directions that I could have went in at that point. And so me seeking out that support and then that type of support that I received was, it just changed my life. So my mother died in July 2020. She actually died because, that was early on with COVID, but she didn't die from COVID. She died from cancer, which she'd had for a few years. And I knew that she was going to die. I had a sense of it. But I actually, because I was already living in London at that point, but I ended up being back in the States during that time period for an unrelated reason. But I kind of, when I left London to go back, I was kind of mentally and emotionally preparing for it because I just had a sense that it was going to happen while I was there. And it did. So she died about a month after her 60th birthday. And I think leading up to her death, I wasn't sure how I was going to feel. I think I was also worried that I was going to have to perform this grief and sadness that I didn't actually think I was going to have, which felt very different because my father had died in 2011, and we had a complicated relationship as well, but it was different, and I felt very close and connected to him overall. And with him, the grief was immediate and expected in the way that it is when you have a parent who you're close to dies. But with my mother, it had always been very complicated. And so so basically, I ended up going to the hospice that she was at. And one of my sisters was there, and my brother was there. And so we were there for several days, and we were just basically waiting for her to pass because she had been in a coma. And on the morning that she died, I ended up being in the room alone with her, which was unusual. My sister and brother we'd all been there together all the past several days, but they had gone out to run some errands and pick up food. So when she died, I was with her alone, and I was very surprised because I just felt this overwhelming sense of compassion and empathy for her, especially a compassion and empathy that I wasn't able to ever really have for her while she was alive. And I found it very surprising, but also very heartwarming and heart-opening because I felt like that part of me had been so hard towards her and closed off that it was just really unexpected. And then in the weeks and months after her death, I just kept coming back to that, and to that particular moment when she took her last breath. And I just really reflected on her suffering that she had experienced all of her life and how painful and distressful that must have been for her. And particularly because up until that point, I had thought about, because I did know some, about her, troubles that she'd had in her own childhood. But I also, it was always thinking about her in relation to how she negatively affected other people, especially myself and my siblings. So after her death, I was just able to really be with that and just, appreciate what she would have been experiencing, and how she died still experiencing that suffering because she didn't really have any moments of peace in her last months of her life as well. So I think I'll actually leave it there. That's okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.